It's crazy to think like, oh, I'm not that bad. And it's like, why are you trying to make the standards of that bad be like the worst of the worst? Like, you don't want to get to that point.
Yeah, you're not
Think about
good.
earlier. Yeah, it's like if it's not good, then you should probably do something about it.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Pickles and Vodka, the mental health podcast where we talk about the things no one wants to talk about in real life. I'm Christina, your host, and I am so excited for today's episode. You don't even know. I am interviewing Jacqueline of the Binge Breakers podcast. She is a bulimia coach and has recovered from bulimia herself. And so I discovered her podcast I want to say a year ago or something, not too long ago. And I was searching for bulimia podcasts and I found hers and I immediately just binged all her episodes, pun intended. Oh man, I'm going to get kicked off of my own podcast. But yeah, I listened to all her episodes. She just approaches bulimia from a very down to earth perspective. Like, she's non-judgmental. Very practical advice that she gives. The most recent episode she published, actually, an episode called Why Purging is Never a Good Idea. I paraphrased that. But I listened to it yesterday, and she was describing all the physical things that happen to you when you purge and why purging will always lead to more binging and how it's just a brutal cycle. And I have to be honest, I've been caught up in that same cycle for the last few weeks or months. I don't even know. Time is a blur when you're bulimic and you're stuck in this cycle. You just never know where you're at. And it was a really helpful episode for me. I was almost annoyed by how practical it was. I was like, God damn it. Now I have to get better. I have to improve myself. What? So yes, Jacqueline is amazing and I'm interviewing her today. There's a few things I want to talk about first before we jump into the interview. I have been asking around to see who among my friends wants to be guests. I find guests a lot of different ways. Sometimes I find them on Reddit, on Facebook groups that I'm in, and a lot of the times they're just people I know in real life. So many times I hear this response from my friends that they want to be on the podcast, but they don't think they have anything interesting to say. And I'm just here to say that is kind of bullshit. I say that with love. The thing about mental health is that everybody has it. You don't have to be mentally ill to take care of your mental health. Everyone has experienced mental health struggles. And the whole purpose of this podcast is to talk about it. And I do this a lot too. I compare my trauma to others and I it's like a competition almost. And sometimes I feel nothing super bad happened to me, so I don't deserve to tell my story. Especially when I'm recording with these amazing guests that have been through so much. And I'm just like, oh my God, my story's nothing compared to theirs. I do it too. I get it. But personally, I find comfort from hearing about people like me. People who are quote unquote regular people, who talk about their mental health, because that's what's not happening. The people with all the insane trauma, that's valid too. But you kind of expect to hear that story. But what you don't hear is just the everyday stuff that happens with your mental health. And I'm trying to think of examples, but just the last year during COVID, we all went through it. And so all I want to say is if you want to be on the podcast and you feel like you don't have anything to talk about, just do it. Just sign up. I don't bite. I promise we'll have a good conversation and we will bring up a lot of stuff that you probably didn't know you needed to talk about. But that's what I'm here for. Okay, I have exciting news that I'm not going to share yet. Oh, Also, I got a job and an apartment in the last week. I completely forgot to say. I found an apartment in Virginia. It's a cute little studio with hardwood floors and a gas stove, and it's super cute, and it's cheap, it's like half of what I pay in Seattle. So that's exciting. And also, I got a job for a consulting firm doing marketing for them. They're really friendly folks. I'm excited to work with them. And yeah, everything's just kind of falling together. The only thing left that I have to plan is like how I'm actually going to get to Virginia because my rental truck fell through. So my sister might be driving to get me, which would be amazing. We're going to do podcasts on the road. It's going to be fun. I know everything will work out. It's a little stressful, but like this last week has been really good for me. And the other exciting news can wait. I'm getting involved in a project that's really exciting and will affect the podcast. So stay tuned for that. Maybe next week or something like that. I don't know. I feel like I had more to say, but I'm not going to because I want you guys to listen to this. We did have only an hour to record, which is kind of unfortunate. I was like running late to get on a bus to Portland when we recorded in May. And so we cut the conversation short at like exactly an hour, but I definitely want to talk to her again. I am going to be on an episode of her podcast this Friday. So once you're done listening to this, go follow Binge Breakers on Instagram, Spotify, whatever, and go listen to our conversation on there. It's really great. All right, I'm so excited to jump into this interview. I hope you all have a wonderful week and stay cool. Okay, we are live.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry for the sheer amount of time it took to plan this. Life just kept getting in the way.
Yeah, you had more important priorities, and that's totally understandable. It's all good. How was treatment and everything?
Oh man, I mean, it was a trip and a half. I learned a lot and had a really great experience.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, I've had some slip ups since then. Just trying to tell myself that recovery is not linear and that if I learn from them, it's not a waste. And listening to your podcast actually helps me a lot with that. I've been listening to you since last autumn, I want to say, and you've helped me a lot, as well as so many other people who struggle with this.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm glad you made it through, and I'm glad that I could be supportive on that journey.
Yeah. How are you doing this morning? I don't see any geckos in the background.
I know, right? They're that was so weird that one time. I was like, excuse me, I have to stop the coaching call and get a gecko. But no, I'm good. It's like I'm more tired this week and everything, so my mind is a little bit fuzzy, but otherwise I'm a-okay. I can't believe it's May already though. I keep wondering where time is going.
It doesn't feel like it. Like I'm in Seattle and it's cold and rainy right now. You're in Miami, right?
I'm Miami. I am in Miami, so it feels kind of like my boyfriend and I were talking about this. It's almost like you're in purgatory because like the weather doesn't change. It's just a little bit like it's in limbo. So we're like, what? It's summer. It was never stopped being summer.
I know. I lived in Miami as a kid, and I remember just like hating it because we have to wear like turtlenecks for Christmas because we had photos to take, and I was like, why are we doing this? The weather's the same all the time.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I remember when I went to go to Florida as a kid and I'd see Floridians wearing like boots and sweaters in like 70 and 80 degree weather. I'm like, why are you guys? They're like, we like to dress in fall clothes. So I get it.
Yeah, it's like 70 degrees. It's a cold front.
Yep.
Okay. Will you introduce yourself to the listeners? Say what your name is, how old you are, and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jacqueline Davis. I almost forget my age. I'm 26.
That's a mood.
And yeah, and I'm a bulimia recovery coach. I've recovered from bulimia myself, and now I help people through their own recovery, and I'm a podcast host for the Binge Breakers podcast.
Yeah, Jacqueline has an amazing podcast that I've personally listened to and got a lot from. Actually, last night I was preparing for this, listening to some of your newest episodes. I have insomnia, and so what I do is just walk up and down this one long street in my neighborhood, and I was like listening to your podcast, and That's when I heard the gecko story, and so I was just like laughing at
Oh.
like midnight listening to your gecko story, as one does.
That's great. I'm glad that I can help you through the insomnia with some laughter at least.
Yeah, so I know you help a lot of people with your podcast. It's a great resource for people with bulimia. But what I want to ask you today is like more your personal story, because
Sure.
you've mentioned it a lot on your own podcast. But I kind of want to talk about your background and when your bulimia started and that sort of thing. So I guess, yeah, when did your bulimia start?
Well, so it's kind of weird. In high school, I actually had bulimia for a really short spout, like my freshman year. And it started out as anorexia and then developed into bulimia. And then my parents found out that summer and I got therapy for it. I don't mention it a lot because I don't remember much of it. And I remember just like wanting to lose weight and being kind of intrigued by the whole thing. So that was like my really interesting experience there. But I got therapy and I was like, I have other things to do. And it for some reason just evaporated. I do not know why. But I went through spouts of like, if something bad happened, I would always like food would not be on the table. But then I went to college. I started getting really into weightlifting and like exercising. But also, I started getting into this idea that I needed to lose a little bit of weight in like my freshman year in college. And that's because I had turned 18, body went through puberty and everything like that. And like when you grow up and you just like your body looks different. And for some
Oh, yeah.
reason, looking back, I didn't, there's no need for anyone to lose weight, but I didn't like feel like that was necessary at all. But I've started a diet, right? That's how it all starts. And so my constant college experience was kind of tainted with the idea that I'm trying to lose weight. And I would always like lose weight and then gain it back, lose weight, gain it back. And then eventually I went to England to study abroad. And I, for some reason, wasn't thinking about it as much, which was fortunate. I was able to enjoy going out with friends and stuff like that. And then when I came back, I realized I'd gained a bunch of weight and it kind of stuck up on me. And then I started that process of like talking really meanly to myself. Before then, it was all about the weight. It wasn't like a personal thing,
Yeah.
even though, of course, there was obviously something going on. But when I came back and I had gained that much weight, I started talking really meanly to myself and started saying things like, you're disgusting, you're horrible, like, how could you do this? And then I started a really extreme diet and was really committed my senior year of college to lose that weight. And I remember over the Christmas break, I opted to like only come home for Christmas a few days and then go back to my apartment so that I could spend weeks alone, not eating, and just going to the gym as much as I could and like lying in bed. That was like how extreme it got. Clearly, there was a problem. And I was like avoiding social activities to diet. And then I was about 2 weeks till I hit my goal weight. And I remember I had like some sort of ice cream or something in the fridge, like a low calorie ice cream and some cookies, which was weird for me since I was scared of food, but I had it there.
Hey, sometimes safe foods don't make any sense.
I know, right? I'm like, why was it even there? But I remember just like eating it. And I remember eating another bite, and just binging. So I was so hungry. And I just lost, that kind of control. And then I remembered, oh my God, like the fear of gaining weight again, and going back to that place where I just felt like I hated myself, even though I hated myself then. Um, I couldn't do it. So I just remembered in high school, I had tried to purge and I was never that successful in high school, but then I tried to do it then and it worked. So that's what spiraled me into bulimia.
Man, and how old were you at the time?
How old was I? 20? I
It's
was
like
20 years old, I
a
believe.
junior in college.
I was a senior in college.
Oh, okay. I forget how old traditional college students are. It took me
Yeah.
8 years to go to college, so I'm just like, what? Damn. So,
Yeah.
growing up, do you think your family dynamic kind of contributed to the way you thought about your body, or like what was the language surrounding like body image in your family?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been thinking about that a lot. And I feel guilty because I don't want to blame it on my parents, but there seemed to be a huge emphasis on how I looked, not in like a bad way. And I think it's because my mom struggled with her weight all her life.
Mm.
And she saw that I wasn't struggling with my weight. And so I would just get compliments. And I'm not saying I was like the prettiest kid or something like that. It's just that for some reason I got compliments on my looks a lot, and specifically by my family. Praise for that. No one was like, Jacqueline, you're so smart or something. It was always like, oh, she's so beautiful. And I just like latched onto that, I think.
People mean so well when they say that sort of thing, but they don't realize that you start to attach all your value to your looks and you think that's the only place that you have value.
Right. Yeah. And you're right, it wasn't ill intended. And I didn't think about it at the time, but when I stopped getting those compliments from gaining some weight, I think I started to then like, I missed those things, that validation. And it wasn't like people were mean to me once I'd gained weight, but I was like, oh, something's wrong. I'm not valuable in that sense anymore. And that really probably damaged me long term.
You're treated differently. It's just the way our
Hmm.
society is. It's unfortunate, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, how soon after you purged for the first time did it become a habit for you?
So I like when that happened, I remember being on the bathroom floor and being like, what the hell just happened? Like this, I'm an adult, like this, I'm a senior in college, like this can't keep happening. So I cleaned up the bathroom and I was like, this can't happen again. My roommate can't find out. No one can find out. We're just done with this. And then I think after that, 2 weeks later, I had reached my goal weight. There was no like carrot I was trying to achieve anymore. So I was trying to maintain, didn't know how to maintain because I was completely crazy around food. And I remember like binging on some pistachios and then I couldn't purge because my roommate was home and I was freaking out. And then I started to spiral after that. And I would like take breaks from class and any chance I really got, I would start binging and purging.
And when you say purge, are you talking about strictly vomiting?
Yeah, strictly vomiting. Hmm.
Okay. And how long did you keep that a secret?
I kept it a secret till for about a year and a half, until at that point I had moved to Colorado to be with my partner. He went to school out there and I had been living with him for a while then. And I felt like I couldn't figure it out and I was behaving irrationally. I was like, it would be fine 1 second and then he would leave for a little while, he'd come back and I was like just completely drained of energy and everything. So I eventually told him because I felt like I needed to get help and I didn't see the potential. I didn't see how it was going to work me sneaking off to meetings without him knowing. Plus, I
Hmm.
just felt so bad lying to him all the time. He didn't, he cared, but he wasn't. I expected him to be angry for some weird reason and that he
Yeah.
was going to think I was a liar and that I was disgusting, which really that's just what I thought about myself. But
Mm.
I told him, well, I blurted it out while we were on the grocery store run, like on our way home. And I was like, holding the steering wheel. I'm like, I need to tell you something. And then he was like, what's going on? And I told him, and he was really, really kind. Thankfully, that's not always the case for people, but that was the case for me. Mhm.
Yeah, I find that a lot of people either they aren't educated about bulimia or they have a certain picture of what bulimia looks like. Do you find that's the
Yeah.
case for a lot of people you meet?
Yeah, I find that there's a misunderstanding when I tell people that I was bulimic. They think it's like maybe all for vanity. Like
Yeah.
when I tell people a lot of times that I was bulimic, they're like, "Why? You look fine," or something like that. Like, or which is it's like, "Oh no, like you don't understand," and saying like I'm normal looking or whatever. And
Oh
then I
God,
find that a
normal's
lot
the
of
worst when people
I
say
know,
normal or like
I
healthy.
know.
They're like, you look so healthy. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, it's like you don't understand,
They mean
and
well,
it's like
you
it's
know?
I know they don't like it. That's the thing. They don't have any idea about it.
Yeah.
And then I find that some people, I've had a lot of clients that will tell their husbands or their partners about it. And their partners are like, what is that? I don't know, and they're usually older. So that maybe has something to do with it, but they have no idea. Like they've never heard of it.
Talking about your clients briefly, not your, I know we're talking about your personal story, but like, do you find that a lot of your
Sure.
clients have kept it a secret for many years?
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yes.
typical. Like, because I know with my bulimia, like it was a secret for many years, and most of the people I know with bulimia have the same type of story where you start maybe in your childhood or early teens, and you keep it a secret for years, sometimes decades, because it is very shameful to talk about in the eating disorder hierarchy. I've
Yeah.
found that bulimia is kind of the one that no one likes to talk about.
People
If
aspire to be anorexic.
yeah,
Yeah.
if we're sticking to like the most commonly known diagnoses, because people usually only talk about anorexia and bulimia. Don't get me started on that whole thing
Yeah.
either.
You asked if like clients have kept it a secret for a
Yeah.
while, and the people that I meet, and it's yeah, typically I've seen people, some of my clients have been married for like 15 years, and or I've had clients that have been like have bulimia for 30 years. They have kids that are in their 20s and they don't know. So like they keep it a secret for a long time. And I'm commonly a lot of times with my clients, like their dirty, their dirty little secret, like the person they go talk to where no one knows. So which is funny. The ones that are in relationships and they do know, then that's a different dynamic. It's really supportive for them. They tend to have a little less shame because they have someone in their corner at the very least.
Yeah, let's talk about relationships when you're bulimic. So you told your partner in Colorado. Also, where are you from originally? Because you're not from Florida, are you?
No, I'm from Indiana.
That's okay. That's why I'm so drawn to your accent. Because I grew up in
Oh, where are you from?
Chicago. Well,
Yes.
I was a military brat, so I lived all over. But I went to high school in Chicago, and the Midwestern accents just bring me so much joy. This makes me
I
feel
know
like
they're
I'm home.
comforting, right? So, side note, when I was in Europe, obviously no one had a Midwestern accent, but we went to Copenhagen,
I don't know.
and they had the most like Midwestern sounding English accent. And so when I went there, I was like, oh, please speak again. Like
My
this is my
people.
home. Yeah. But no, if you do you know where Michigan City's at?
No.
Okay, no, because you grew up like partly in Chicago.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you take the South Shore at all?
No.
Oh my God. Okay, no, it's fine. Like there's the South Shore train in Chicago and it connects you to
Oh,
the
maybe
Indiana
then.
and yeah, it takes you to South Bend all the way there.
Okay.
Indiana. I don't know if you know where that's at, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back to partnerships. So, oh man. Okay, let's talk about partnerships with bulimia. So you told your partner and how he reacted pretty well, you said?
Yeah, he reacted pretty well. He's kind of a different guy in that he kind of gives you he's still like quite independent and he wasn't like on me all the time about recovery. He
Okay.
kind of just took my word for it that I'm trying to recover, gave me space with that. But I think
Is it the
some people
same?
fear,
Sorry, is it the same partner you're with now?
yeah,
Okay.
we've been together for 8 years now. Hmm.
Nice.
Yeah,
When you told him, did you want to recover?
I did. I really desperately wanted to recover, and I didn't go on to recover till like 2.5 years later after that, if I'm remembering the time correctly. But I just needed to tell him because I wanted to find help. And I didn't know what was gonna, I was really scared too. I remember that. I remember like, I'm doing really bad things to myself. I don't know who to try. I feel crazy. So
Yeah.
that's why I told him.
Did your definition of recovery change over the years? Like, because back then, oh man, as you were talking, I had this perfect question formulated. It's still like early here, so I'm just like, I guess I want to talk about the concept of recovery because obviously you're a recovery coach.
Mhm.
But I know recovery can look different for a lot of people and it's not linear and it's very individualized. And I know I was listening to one of your episodes where you talk about how you really thought you would have it forever. It was just like a hobby, like something you did kind of from
Mhm.
time to time. And like I have felt like that too, slash feel like that at certain points. It's like, wow, is this going to be a lifetime thing? Is recovery just
Yep.
like putting more and more time in between lapses? So like when
Yeah.
you were at the time in Colorado, when you told your partner, what was your idea of recovery and like how has it changed now? I know that's a lot to answer.
No, yeah. I think it's funny when you're always being interviewed, you think you're like talking a lot too, but I think that's the point of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think at the time I'm trying to remember because like my brain was like so foggy then too. I remember just thinking my goals for life is like, what if I could just not binge and purge, right? It's like that I think was my baseline definition of recovery. It's like, man, if I just didn't like binge and then throw up my food, that would be nice, right? That'd be
So
great.
just focusing on the
And
behaviors alone.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And over time, I think I realized that there was so much more to it. Like I talk in my podcast a lot about that bulimia is just a behavior and the fact of binging and purging. And to focus on that is a really good thing. But I didn't realize then that like I need to clean up so much of my personal and mental health to maybe get that going. So now my definition of recovery is like, you're not, I don't like calling people bulimic either, just because like
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is a behavior, but I like to tell people to try on the concept of like the second you stop binging and purging, you're no longer bulimic, right? To think about it that way, because it's just a behavior. But ideally, if we're just like generalizing, my definition of recovery now is that you're not binging and purging, you have a good relationship with food, whatever that looks like to you, right? Whatever you're comfortable with, and that you're not like constantly in fear of going back to bulimia, and your mental health is pretty good. Like you're actually moving on with your life. You're not still obsessed with food and body weight and all that sort of stuff.
That's the hardest thing, is to not be terrified of going back to it, because bulimia is hell. Like, I don't need to tell you that. And it kind of has a way of infiltrating every single part of your life. And
Yes.
yeah, how often were you binging and purging at the time you told your partner?
It was pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And if he was home, then I wouldn't. But if I had a chance alone, it would probably happen, right? If I was alone, then I would be binging and purging for the most part. And then some days it got like, sometimes it was worse. Like I'd be binging and purging multiple times per day. At the point when I recovered from the behavior, like stopped doing that, I was binging and purging maybe like 3 times a week
Hmm.
at most.
So that was your first step in recovery, was to stop the behavior?
Yeah, I really think I did my recovery maybe backwards. I don't know, but I, because I never got, and I think when people hear me say I'm a coach, like I'm for all types of treatment and stuff like that, whatever works. But I found help in the coaching industry, and so I found like was looking for like weight loss help, and I stumbled across a podcast that talked about it, but they talked about the mental health aspect of it first, like being in
Oh,
the right mindset.
I
And I was
wish more
like,
people
what?
did that.
I know, right? It's like
That's
you need to change your thoughts and like be in a healthy mindset and then lose weight. Like, so, so I was like, maybe I need to do some stuff here. And then I finally got into coaching, and I really stopped treating myself, like stopped telling myself terrible things, and stopped beating myself every second, and stopped kind of like acting like I was a horrible person. And then once I got that stuff cleaned up more so, and I was being kind to myself, and I was actually trying in my life again, then I was like, you know what, I really don't, I had given up on bulimia at that point, but I was like, you know what, I don't really want this anymore. And then it was much easier to leave the behaviors behind because I had things to look forward to, I think.
yeah. I'm focusing on the phrase like a horrible person. Like, you thought you were a horrible person. Do you know where that stems from? Like, was it strictly because of the behaviors that you thought you were a horrible person, or is there something deeper there?
Oh no, it like, I don't know if I just had crazy standards for myself or what,
Don't
but
we all? If
yeah, it's like
chances
we're
are,
all
if you
just,
have eating disorder, you have insanely high standards for yourself.
I know, you just think I had always had this fantasy maybe of like when I was growing up that I was going to be this like wealthy career woman who is just killing it in life and doesn't need no man and all that sort of stuff. And
Ugh.
and then I was gonna be like a size 2, and so like already like some expectations there that maybe aren't the best. But I think once that transition between going from high school, and you think as a kid everything's going to be great as an adult,
That's what
and
they
then
tell
it's
you.
not. Yeah, that's what they tell you.
Just keeps
And then
getting
it's
worse,
not.
kids. Just keeps getting
Yeah.
worse. Hate to break it to you. No one knows what they're doing.
No, that's someone and I were just talking about how like adults are just big children.
Yes.
They no one has it figured out, right?
Yeah.
But I think I was upset. I thought I was a horrible person because I felt like I couldn't control my emotions. I felt like I couldn't do anything right. I was in like with finances, with my relationships, both like romantic and personal and friends. I felt like my job was mediocre, and none of these things, like they're not reasons to think someone's a bad person, right? But I just kept telling myself things like this, look, you're just a fuck up here, you're just a fuck up here. When really I could have said like these things can be changed and they don't make you a bad person either way. But I was so deep in that mindset of like this is another failure. This is a failure. Look at you. You're just a failure. That's what I kept saying.
So in some ways, did the bulimia seem kind of like a culmination of all those thoughts? Like it would like, did you feel like it would have led to that eventually or something similar? Like, did you ever
Um,
self-harm or anything like that as a kid? Or
I I tried to once, and then I was like, I can't do this because what I did
because
as
in
a
my
kid. But
experience, bulimia is, I mean, as you know, it's usually a symptom of some greater problem. And in my
mhm,
experience, it's come out in a lot of different ways besides bulimia. So the times that I wasn't bulimic, I was like abusing substances or self-harming, for instance. And I know a lot of people that
mhm.
that's the case. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that bulimia was maybe not even just bulimia, but my whole obsession with weight and like image was like a way to try to make my life perfect. Because like if I just did that, then all those other things would fall into place, right?
Yeah,
And I think also then the binging became like a way to escape from my life. Like it's telling myself all the time, you suck, look here, everything's like falling apart, like you can't do anything. I was like, I just need to numb out. And it's interesting, I guess I learned more too, like a lot of people that are bulimics struggle with substance abuse, right? Or a lot of people that
yeah.
struggle with substance abuse go to bulimia as well. It's really interesting. I
Yeah,
myself,
more so than anorexia.
yeah. Well, I look at it a lot like the binging is kind of your choice of drug, or like the purging can be your choice of drug or whatever. I mean, there's different types of it, I know, but and I found myself after recovering from the behavior of binging and purging, I found myself craving alcohol a lot more, which
Mm.
I've never had any issues with alcohol. And I found myself like wanting to drink randomly in the middle of the afternoon. I was like, this is so odd. And yeah, it was strange.
A lot of people have compared bulimia to addiction. Some people have even gone so far as to call it an addiction. I was talking about this recently in one of my audio journals. I feel like I can't call it an addiction because it's not like I won't get withdrawals if I stop eating food, you know? Or like if I
Mm,
stop purging, I won't get withdrawals. It doesn't like, I guess it does change your neural pathways, but not in the same way. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know.
right.
But have you encountered that comparison in your work and like what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree it's not the same as like a substance abuse. A lot of people say it can't be an addiction because of like the chemical components, right? And there's no withdrawal. But I find it's a really easy way to compare it. And nothing's like black and white. So
Yeah.
I'm full when I say this, like I definitely view bulimia more as an addiction. I know that's not the full story, right?
Oh, I
Like you
mean,
said, there's
same.
other things. Yeah, yeah. But I think it's really good to sometimes look at it that way because it first of all it doesn't make it so personal, and I think a lot of us make bulimia really personal about us. But then if you can look at it as an addiction, then I think it's easier to look at the behaviors and how to stop them, like the binging is your choice of drug. And you say the withdrawals is interesting. I was thinking about that, and you don't get like withdrawals, sure. But I noticed in my own recovery, and I noticed sometimes with people I have talked to, that there's this period once they stop the behavior where they kind of like open up to life again. And a lot of it doesn't feel super good. Like I remember there was oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was
You're
just
good.
saying, just came out of treatment like 2 months ago, right? And so when I
Hmm.
first got in there and they started feeding me 6 times a day, my body reacted very violently. It was not
Hmm.
happy. It didn't know how to digest food. And that's just the physical side. The emotional side was a different story. That sure, it's not withdrawals, but your body goes like you yourself through a lot of shit when you're bulimic. I think
Yes.
a lot of us
Hmm.
either downplay the physical side of it or like we ignore it.
Yeah. I find myself thinking all the time, like it wasn't that bad, right? Like I wasn't, and that's a lot of things people say to themselves to not get help. They think I'm not that bad. Fortunately, I didn't have any huge physical side effects. Like a lot of things still seem normal to me. I don't know the full extent of the damage, but yeah, the physical side effects were still like I would still be like fatigued and just brain fog all the time. And I definitely think I suffered with like just bulimia digestion in general. I was like
Yeah,
it didn't go back to normal for about a year.
that's a long time.
I know, yeah, it sucked.
Is that pretty typical?
I don't know, because again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's hugely typical, but from what I see, like maybe when I say a year, it's not like it was like at its worst for a full year and then it suddenly went back to normal. It was like for a few months, probably not so great, and then it got better and better over time. That's
Hmm.
when I do work with people, like those first like month or two is the hardest with
Yeah, for
digestion.
sure. Oh, so but going back to your own recovery story, what steps did you take after you told your partner?
Yeah. So after that, I tried to look up some sort of like help online, like a therapist online. Realized I couldn't afford it, didn't have insurance.
Mm.
And so I was like, I'm just going to have to do this on my own. And then just kept cycling until I just kind of given up. And I was like, I hope I can just make these symptoms as less as possible. And then I fell into the coaching, and that's like I fell into that podcast, and then I finally looked into life coaching. I signed up for a life coaching program to get coaching. And then I started talking to those people working on mental health. And then eventually I asked someone, I was like, I'm still doing this bulimia recovery thing. I've been looking into habits a lot more. It seems like it's just a habit. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I keep on doing it. Can you help me? And this person she is not an expert in bulimia at all. And she was like, have you tried pausing? And I'm like, no, I guess not. And which sounds so simple and stupid, but and like frustrating. But I when I say all this, like I was in a spot that I was like really ready to let go. I was
Mm.
really done, and I just kept compulsively doing it. And so and when I say pause, what she meant is like setting aside time when you're about to go down that urge road. I would take a step back and be like, wait, like let's make a decision here. Do I really want to do this? And I felt the emotions instead of trying to like block them out. And that's what I think a lot of people do with eating disorders. They kind of like tighten up. um, and it actually wasn't that bad, and I was actually able to like feel the urge and then walk away. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't that bad.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's the hardest thing. And I'm pulling up a handout from one of my group therapies because it's exactly what you're talking about. Have you heard of STOP?
No, I have not.
It's pretty common. STOP. It's just like, what's that when the first letter means something?
I don't know.
Anyway, so the S stands for stop. T is take a step back. O is observe, and then P is proceed mindfully. And that's helped me a lot
Mm,
because pausing is the hardest part. When you are in the
yeah,
middle of that craving, you don't really prepare yourself for like handling the distress in the moment.
yeah.
How long did it take you to kind of start working on that?
So it's you say like in the moment it's really hard, and how I got myself to do it initially is I said I am willing to pause. Like I can still binge afterwards if I want to.
Hmm.
Like that's like the deal I made with myself, just because I was like so ready to get done with it. I'm like, okay, let's just like try this. I really looked at it as an experiment. And I think that helped take the pressure off because I wasn't expecting it to work or something. I was just like, we're just gonna try it. But I after that, and again, it sounds unrealistic, but after that, I think I had one more incident, and then I was like, I'm done with this. So within a span of a month after learning that pause method, I was able to let go, and then I just had to move on to the other part of my recovery, which is kind of like being normal.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, being I hate that word too, because like people are like, I just want to be normal, and I'm like, okay, what is your standard of normal?
Yeah.
Because they usually have crazy standards for what normal people do.
Yeah, people define it themselves. There is no objective normal. I
Right.
think, 2020 reminded us of that more than ever, and now normal doesn't really exist anymore. Like we're redefining it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
when did you start seeing a coach for your bulimia?
Maybe it was about a year before I recovered.
Okay.
So I don't know what year, because I struggled with bulimia for about 4 years.
Okay.
Though when I say that, like people hear that and they're like, oh, it's not that long, which is interesting. But I was struggling with disordered eating before that for sure. Like there was weird
Yeah.
things going on, but it's about a year before I actually recovered.
Also, I hate it when people compare themselves to other people's stories. Like,
Right.
can we all just stop comparing ourselves and just focus on our individual? Like, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I do it all the fucking time.
Of course.
Um, yeah, it's
Hmm.
just especially when you do have an eating disorder, you tend, like, I didn't get treatment for the longest time because I was like, oh, I'm not sick enough. Like, I haven't lost enough weight, or
Mm,
like, I haven't fainted or anything like that. Like, and that's
right.
what keeps you sick for long periods of time.
Yeah, it's crazy to think like, oh, I'm not that bad. And it's like, why are you trying to make the standards of that bad be like the worst of the worst? Like, you don't want to get to that point.
Yeah, you're
So
not
you can help
good.
earlier. Yeah, it's like if it's not good, then you should probably do something about it. Yes.
But I wanted to ask, what is the difference between like a coach and a therapist?
Right. So I have had therapy, but it was when I was much younger. And when I say this again, I think all forms are valid and necessary, right? And I just happened to, it resonated with me coaching. But I think the biggest thing from what I see with the people, a lot of people that work with me have gone to therapy before. And so they say like it's nice because we seem to focus more on action items and actual like present thoughts we're thinking about. It like is a little bit stealing from cognitive behavioral therapy in the sense of like we focus on how their thoughts are affecting their thinking.
Mm.
So like let's say someone talks to me and they just had a binge and purge. So I talk about, okay, like what were you thinking beforehand? What was going on? Why did we do this? Like how can we change it in the future? So it's very action oriented. Maybe I give them a little bit of homework because therapists I don't think give as much homework. That being said, I think this is an overgeneralization of therapy. There's so many different types of therapy.
Yeah.
Maybe the main thing is with coaching, we focus a lot more on present things. And whereas I've heard a lot of people talk about how therapy was talking a lot more about childhood,
Mm.
that sort of stuff. But like, see, some people that have gone through trauma, I wouldn't feel comfortable working with them because I think therapy is really needed for that, right? I don't think people
Yeah.
need to be coached out of trauma, right? I don't think it really
Yeah.
worked.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. I was just wondering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
of
took
course.
you a year to recover, you said?
Yeah. So I started coaching, but the funny thing was I did not get coaching for bulimia. It
Oh,
was just, yeah. So I was so like given up on my recovery that I was just trying to like move on with my life and keep the binging and purging. So I just was like, you know what? I want to, get my finances under control. I want to get my mental health better. Let's do coaching. But I was like bulimic on the side. So I did all that. And then eventually I was still binging and purging, but a lot of things have been cleaned up in my life. And that's when I started asking like a week before I stopped, or not a week, like a month or two before I stopped behaviors, I started bringing that up in the calls with people.
mm.
And I felt bad for a lot of these coaches because they weren't like bulimia is not what you generally get coached for. So they felt very like awkward about talking about it, but
I
they were
bet.
still helpful. Yeah.
That's good. I would imagine they wouldn't even know like what to say in certain cases.
No. Yeah. Well, I remember being terrified to talk about it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to bring that up. I wanted to do everything but that, which I realized I was like, I need to just start saying it. I need to get some help on this.
Yeah, and I know you talk about the one call that changed your life in one of your podcast episodes. I
Hmm.
listened to half that episode and then I stopped because I didn't want to spoil it. I wanted you to kind of tell it to me right now.
Okay.
Just in a nutshell, what was that call and how did it change your life?
Okay, yeah. So it wasn't the call. Unfortunately, I don't have a call where I asked someone about like bulimia, right?
Yeah,
But like about like my recovery. But this was a point where I was considering being a life coach myself and I really wanted to
gotcha.
help people and I was wanting to change my career. And so I knew I wanted to help people with eating disorders or like food in some way. But I was really nervous. My family didn't know. This whole time, only my partner knew, my roommate from college, and then any coach I had talked to.
Oh wow, that
So
was going to be
I
one of
was,
my questions is like who did you
yeah,
tell about it? And you were recovered at this
I,
point and just trying to figure out like your career stuff?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So I was all recovered and like I was pretty good on food, everything like that. And I wanted to help people. So I asked this coach, I was talking about niching. We were just talking about like, because that's the thing you do in business is like having to target people to help, right? And so she was like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I could do eating disorders, but that's kind of weird. Like, I don't, and she was like, why is that weird? And I was like, well, it's personal and I would have to tell people. And I started crying because she was like, I still don't understand why that's weird. And I was like, I really don't want people to judge me and think badly of me. And that's when I realized I was still holding onto a lot of shame, and I was trying to basically manipulate people's opinions of me, thinking that nothing had gone wrong. And really the truth was I had been in a dark spot for a while, and no one knew, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to share that.
How did you finally start sharing that with people?
Well, the call that changed my life, she was like, that's your work to do. I was like, how do I get over the fear of judgment from people? And we were I came to the conclusion that like, you don't necessarily, like, you're always maybe going to have a bit of fear there. But I really realized that I wish I had had the podcast that I'm making. Like, I wish I had had stories like that to look up. There's not, I mean, what you're doing too is so important. There's not enough people talking about what we're talking about. So I was like, there's someone out there that is going through exactly what I'm going through. I need to do this for them. It's more important than me. And that's really what helps me push through that, I think. And then it was just like a whole bunch of like adrenaline doing it
Yeah.
anyway.
I don't
Yeah.
even remember when I started talking about my bulimia more openly. I think it was around the time I started my podcast in 2018. But it does feel like an adrenaline rush. You think like something really bad is going to happen when you tell someone,
Mm-hmm.
but I have not experienced a single bad reaction, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm fortunate in that
Yeah.
regard. It's not true for everybody.
Yeah. I've heard some like horror stories, but I'm glad that you haven't had any like super negative reactions. And I'm sure you get this, but like people reach out to you and they're like, thank you. I feel so less alone and isolated, and it gives people hope. You know, you're still trucking, you're figuring things out. It's like nice to see that, oh, there is hope. People can get through this, right?
Yeah, and I'm really impressed that you went from like not telling anyone to like becoming a bulimia coach and starting a bulimia podcast. And I know that didn't happen overnight. I kind of
Right.
want to hear the story of how that came to be, but I want to hear more about you telling people in the beginning and like what feelings and thoughts were going through your mind.
um so I'll tell you the specific story. I recorded the podcast, and then I'd already recorded the episode, still haven't told even my like family, just my boyfriend knows about this at that point. And I was like, to get the podcast to be seen, I have to start sharing it places. And I was like, that's the only way it's going to get seen. And so I was like, okay. I told my parents the Sunday before I released the episode. I was like, guys, so I made a podcast. And they're like, what about? And I was like, it was about bulimia. And they're like, oh, from when you're younger? And I was like, no, actually, like I've been through all of this. You'll hear it in the episode, but I just want to prepare you. I am fine now. But they were like, oh, I'm sorry that you have been struggling. And it was really hard on them to listen to that first episode and realize all these things have been going on, and they had no idea. So
Yeah.
that was kind of hard, but they're proud of what I'm doing now for sure.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know how I would feel if I learned that my daughter was like binging and purging all these years and I didn't know. Like I can only
Yeah,
imagine. I mean, obviously you're better now and that's amazing. I just I can't believe that that's how they found out. That's so funny to me.
I know. I'm such a I'm sure a lot of people are like this, but I can be too secretive, and that's why this was like hard work for me like everyone else. But yeah, and then I felt guilty about that too, but I moved past it for the most part. And then the Saturday after that, I shared it on my public Facebook profile, which I was even more terrified to do that. I was like expecting people to think it was weird again, and that people were going to say it's inappropriate, and like, who are you to be doing a podcast? And that was a big thing too, is like, who are you to be helping people with bulimia? What do you know? All that sort of stuff. But you know, you think all these things and it's really just your own mind, because I got
Mhm.
so many like kind responses. And the cool thing was, so many of my friends reached out that told me they were struggling with the same thing. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
pretty typical. I've found
mhm,
that a lot of people have told me they have it, and there's others that I'm sure have it that haven't told me. It's way more
mhm,
common than we think. Oh,
absolutely.
my
Yeah.
cat has made an
People,
appearance. He hasn't come up this whole time. I've been pretty happy. Anyway.
I can't let my dog in this room. He'll just like start making all the weird noises in the world.
Oh, I mean, that would be fun too, maybe to spice
Yeah,
things
I
up. Maybe do
guess.
a bonus episode one day where he makes an appearance.
He's a dog, but he's kind of like a cat, so he like gives himself baths all the time. It would just people would just hear like licking noises in the background. It wouldn't be very appealing.
Um, I wanted to ask you about coming out with your bulimia, so to speak. Did you find that that was absolutely necessary for your recovery? And do you tell your clients that they need to tell people about it?
Yeah, I think it was necessary for my recovery. I think it was one of those final layer things. So I was doing really well, but when you, because the work that you have to do to actually tell people is important, right? You're like, everything's fine if I could just like not ever tell a single soul and just be fine with it. I'd like to pack it up and move on and like let it, I'll just go to my grave with it. And it's like, why do you want to go to your grave with it? Why are you so ashamed to tell people? And if you can figure that out and move past it and own it, right? Because you shouldn't have to feel ashamed with struggling. Everyone struggles. I think it's
Yeah.
important work to do. So I don't tell people like it's necessary for recovery, but whenever people are like, I just want to never tell anyone, I'm like, you should probably tell someone at some point.
If there's anyone listening that might be struggling in secret, what would you recommend for them? Like, how do you even start approaching the possibility of telling someone? It's so scary.
Yeah. So I'd first make sure that if you're planning on telling someone, make sure it's someone that you trust and it's a safe space and you know that you were safe, because I have heard stories where it hasn't gone as well. So um, if you're going to tell someone, also, I don't think it's good to have expectations of that person, right?
Like accountability and stuff, like telling someone so they keep you accountable.
Yeah, because then you might like present them. Also, you're putting the burden of them of like they don't know how to react either. I would just come up to someone if you're planning on telling them and be like, I just need someone to talk to. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just need someone to listen to me, right? And I am really struggling with something. It's and that might be a good way to approach the situation. But the most like the two most important things is like I know a lot of people think that the person they're telling is gonna think that they're like disgusting, a liar, or something like that. Like a lot of that's not true. That's in your head, right? Not the other person's. And I try to say, like, if a friend came to you and told you the same thing, how would you react? And you
Yeah.
probably would be very kind.
I realized
And
I
then
asked
also,
you. Oh, sorry, continue.
go ahead.
No, start
No, go
over.
ahead. That's fine.
I
No,
realized
it's
I
good.
asked you about relationships earlier and then we veered off topic.
Oh, yeah.
But this kind of ties into what we're talking about now, like telling people. I can imagine that if you have a partner, telling your partner is probably one of the first things you do if it's a trusting relationship.
Right.
In my experience, again, I'm fresh out of treatment. Do not have the years of recovery under my belt like you do. And so I have ruined a lot of my relationships with my
Mm.
in part due to my bulimia. And so I was wondering if you had anything to say about that in terms of like being a recovering bulimic or being bulimic in recovery, I should say, and also being in a long-term relationship, like how that experience was for you and like what you tell clients who are kind of in the same situation.
Yeah. So you're asking, like, if you're in recovery or like struggling with bulimia and you're in a long-term relationship, like what to do?
Like what is the appropriate level of responsibility that they should feel, or if any, maybe they like boundaries are really important. And
Yeah.
I'm not the best at them, obviously.
Yeah, well, again, not the expert, right? Every relationship's different.
Yeah.
So take it with a grain of salt. But what I tell people, I just did an episode about this like a month or two ago. Like I think you sent it to your mom or something, but
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing you can do in a relationship, especially if it's just like one-on-one, is first of all, like the people that are struggling with bulimia, don't expect them to like help like take on your recovery, right? Like
Yeah.
try to not put so much pressure on them and try to be empathetic towards them, because they're watching you do things to yourself that they wish you weren't doing. It's hard on them, it's stressful. So I know that you guys are struggling with bulimia, so that's hard, but also your partner is struggling in some way. So try to be empathetic. Don't put all the accountability on them. Maybe ask them like, hey, this would be really nice if I could get this from you. So like one time I was talking to a client, she was like, I just really, my husband leaves, like just a phone call at night would be really helpful. So like ask them for what you need and then talk about what's appropriate, right? Together, because it's going to be different for everyone. So just put it on the table what you think you need, and then you guys can have a discussion about it.
I love that. I'm about to move home to Virginia in a couple of months to be closer to my family while I spend a year in recovery, and I plan on doing that very thing, just having a meeting with them and sitting them down and being like, okay, here are my boundaries. Here's what I need from you. What are your expectations? I think that communication is so, so important.
Yeah. And everyone's different and you have no idea what some people like, they don't need a whole lot, right? And then some people need a lot. So it's good to at least be on the same page with what's going on.
Yeah. So you're a coach now. How long have you been doing that for?
So I started in 2020. I started before the podcast in 2020, like around January. And it was just like here and there, a few people. Then I started the podcast. Then it really like started picking up. So
I didn't realize it was that like not that long ago. It's really crazy how
it wasn't
much it's boomed.
Yeah, well, I feel kind of like embarrassed saying that, or like there's the imposter syndrome, right? Of
Oh my
like,
God, yeah.
who are you? And but I knew that at least I had things to tell people, right? And at that point, I wasn't necessarily coaching specifically on bulimia. So, but I knew that I had things to offer. I knew I had drastically changed my life. So that's what I was trying to do. And then when I niched into bulimia, that's where things really took off because I was offering specific things to people to help them. And I had a story I think people resonated with.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with your story so strongly, obviously, and I know so many other people do. When you say imposter syndrome, like I wish we had more time to talk about that. We could do a whole episode on that because, oh man.
Well, I was gonna ask, like, I have 2 calls after this, so I do have to leave like immediately. But if we want to continue this later
I have
today,
to catch a bus to Portland.
Okay.
Like literally,
Okay.
it leaves an hour after this, so I have to run.
Okay.
But I wanted to ask you, like, what is next for you with your business, with your personal recovery, all that stuff?
Well, with personal recovery, I'm actually trying to gain some weight right now. Muscle mass, which is like totally new. Like what eating disorder trying to gain weight, it's like different for me. So that's cool. I'm just like always like taking care of my personal life. So I'm really struggling sometimes to find a balance between like not working too much and like making business my obsession or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to live my own personal life.
I was going to ask you if you ever find yourself slipping back into that bulimic mindset when you're stressed.
Yeah, so that is a cool thing I like to talk about. Like I still occasionally get urges to like purge or binge and purge, and they're really subtle, but they're way worse when I have not been taking care of myself. And then about 3 months ago, I fell asleep in my desk chair at like 2 p.m. because I just wasn't, I was not getting enough sleep. I was like working too often. And that's when I was like, I need to make my schedule more sustainable. This is not okay. Like I didn't go through all this to then become a workaholic. So yeah, when you're not taking care of yourself, you can easily slip back into behaviors. And I'm not ashamed of that. It's just like how it is. So
I mean, you were talking about having like switching from bulimia to like something else. We were talking about alcohol in the moment, but I think work can definitely be a replacement behavior if you're not careful, like overworking.
Right. And it can be that distraction. Plus, with alcohol, I did find a few months ago as well, I was like drinking on the weekends more often. And I've just cut that out because I found myself like looking forward to drinking on the weekends. And it's like, it wasn't negatively impacting me. I didn't feel super good, but
not yet, at least.
Like, right. And I was like, this seems like it's headed in a bad road. So I haven't drank in like 2 months now, I think, and I'm feeling great, good with that.
I mean, that just shows me how much progress you've made that you were able to stop it before it started becoming a bad thing, you know? I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that too. And but no one's immune, right? Anyone can fall into things, but it's knowing that, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. I love talking to you. Do you have any final thoughts or advice to give before we wrap up?
Well, I'm really enjoying talking to you too. So you should come on my podcast sometime. We should have some catch up chat. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've been thinking about lately that is there's no like right or wrong way to recover. There's a lot of different ways that can work. And I say this all the time, but like find what works for you. And also, I think the biggest thing that changed for me in recovery was believing that it was possible. And that's when I actually started trying, right? Like having hope and working towards it. So find something out there that like gives you evidence that there is hope and like run with it. I think would be the biggest cheesy thing that I would give as advice.
It might be cheesy, but it's true. Like, you can't recover unless you believe in it. I think belief was one of the traits you mentioned on one of your recent episodes of like traits to recover or something like that. It's hard. Yeah, and that timing has to be right.
Yes. It's like if you're not ready, then no one's ready, but if you're not like willing to recover and you're not like believing it's possible, you're probably not gonna go too far. So really like try to get inspired, try to find some belief, try to keep pushing. I think those are all really good things for recovery.
I totally agree. And you really inspire me to want to recover more. And it's been so good talking to you. I really appreciate it. Can you tell people where to find you and how to get in touch if they're interested in coaching and that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So you can just find my podcast on most major platforms. It's called Binge Breakers, but if you type in bulimia, I think it comes up too.
I think that's how I found you.
Yeah. That's how most people find me. And then you can find me on Instagram, same handle, Binge Breakers. And my website is just bingebreakers.com if you want to look into coaching with me. But my podcast is a great place to start, and it's a free resource for everyone. So
yeah, go check it out. And recovery is possible. It's just, it might not look how you think, but it's out there.
Yeah. People have, I think that's another thing. People have such their own interpretation of what recovery should look like, and just like throw that out the window.
It's kind of like that vision you were talking about in the beginning of you like being a boss ass bitch with like a size 2 and like all this stuff. Like, recovery is not like that. Recovery is scary. Or sometimes recovery means crying into a sandwich, you know?
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely does.
And being constipated.
Oh my gosh. We could talk for a lot about that. That's a huge.
All right, I'll stop us there then before we delve into that. That's a great note to end it. Thank you, Jacqueline. This has been so great. And I love your podcast. I love you, and I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Christina. I appreciate it as well.
Yeah. You have a good day in Florida. And
my
cat just knocked something
absolutely over. Like, I'm sorry we're so limited on time, but I'd love to have you back again.
Yeah, this was totally my fault. Like, I did not plan well at all, so it's on me.
Okay, we got stuff going on. It's fine. We got it done.
Yeah, I feel like when you're recovering, you have that brain, like bulimia brain still. It's like, makes you stupid or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because you got a lot going on, but keep on pushing through it. You'll get there.
Thanks. You have a good day.
Christina.
Bye. Hey guys. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pickles and Vodka. If you could relate to anything we talked about, you can follow the podcast at Pickles and Vodka Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook by typing in Pickles and Vodka Podcast. You can also email me at picklesandvodkapodcast@gmail.com if you have any stories or if you just want to say hi. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Stay safe.